So welcome back to the next update on the digital watch build. I've got some exciting updates for you, including new PCBs. If you're wondering what these are, it's because I've got a top-down rig, so you should be able to see what I'm looking at down on the bench. So these boards came in earlier this week, and I've been so excited to get them soldered up. I've got all my parts here. So here's the original. Obviously, you might remember it. It's still going, still keeping time. It's a little bit bright, hence why you can't quite see the numerals on there. But I've learnt a bit after making this, and I've made some improvements on this new movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder it up and then talk you through the changes from the first version to this new version. So without further ado, let's just get this soldered up, shall we? Everything is now soldered up, apart from the buttons and the jumper. This is the first power up of the beta version 0.2. This is the first time I powered it up, so fingers crossed. This looks so much nicer than the original red one. There's the red one for comparison. Just looks so much better, doesn't it? In there. Clip. Oh, there we go. Let me see if I can turn this light down. If you can see it a bit better. It's showing up a lot better in brighter light than the other one. Here's the old one for comparison. Mimic pressing the button. And looks like we just need to set the time. So I should be able to press. So it turns out I'd actually made another mistake on the PCB. The reason why the display is only showing 4 zeros when it should be displaying the compile time was because there was no power getting to the RTC chip, and yes, it was another PCB trace issue. So you can see here I'm trying to set the time, but as soon as it gets reset, it's not going to hold that time because it's not setting the time to the RTC. So I did a little bit of debugging after this video, and I had to install a jump wire. Everything else works absolutely fine. It was just another trace issue. Yes, it's annoying, but it's an easy fix. It's an easy fix, so I'm not too worried. I'll give you a little preview of the case now before I get any further. So this is what we're going to be putting it in. Now it looks a little bit different to this one. In the first one we just had one button for display. In this one I put 2 side buttons, and these are going to be our minute and hour pushers. This also gives us the capability of being able to use these buttons to use other functions basically. So once we go on to display the time, we can then maybe use these to, maybe if we hold them down we can scroll through a menu for different settings. But I've just left them on the outside now for that kind of capability. Nothing's programmed yet. One problem I have thought is that this movement is slightly smaller than the existing, and this is the only one I've printed. Unfortunately not tonight, we're not going to get this in the case properly tonight. The other thing I've done is improved the case back quite a lot. So whereas the old style use these like pins to hold the movement in place, this one is going to actually, the battery is going to sit in there. Oh, that's looking good. That's the thumbnail. So let's run through a couple of changes between the two revisions. First thing you're going to notice is that the digits are all nice and snug together. This has just helped me reduce the PCB size ever so slightly, but every fraction of a millisecond really helps on this. I've also come up with a different layout for the components on the front, which I'm a lot happier with. I've added another capacitor, a decoupling capacitor for the RTC chip, which is there. As you can see, there isn't one on there. It wasn't a problem, but it's just good practice. I've increased the size of the SMD resistors if you remember on this one, they were just way too small to deal with. I mean, the camera's barely picking them up there, but they were just horrible to solder. So these were a lot easier to solder, and I didn't really have any problems getting it all soldered together. Now the biggest differences are actually on the back. First thing you're going to notice is the battery clip I've used. It's this much nicer drop-in style of bracket rather than the slide-in. This one caused me a few issues because I had to remove the case to remove the movement to push a battery in before putting it back in. And it's really important that you remove the battery before programming, so the battery could be coming out a few times in its lifetime, not just when it needs replacing. And this just makes it really easy to change the battery. The hours and minute pads are big enough to solder wires on if you wanted to have the switches externally mounted, and there's also not really the space to have more of these plugs. On this revision, because there was so much debugging I had to do on this one, I've included a lot more sort of pads so you can test various points. So see, we've got voltage there, we've got a ground. I've even put on a 2-pin for the crystal. I've also added a few, well, one extra IO pin there, that D0. That's got a little resistor on it, so you could use that as another interrupt or another switch for another feature that you might have in mind. There's a bit of scope for your own modification. The only problem I've had on this one is where this jumper wire is here. And I think the black PCB looks far nicer than this red. I don't know why I picked red in the first place. It looks kind of cool though. Ooh, and I'm also really pleased with these red digits. I prefer them much more than the green ones that I've used before. There we go. What's happening there? I think something's shorting. So I think we had a little problem with the battery there. I think it's been shorted out. But there we go. The red displays are far brighter and nicer to look at than the green ones that we had on the original. But obviously it's optional. You could use whatever colour you like. Okay, so another thing I've done with the new PCB is put a little header on the back. This is a micro JST female header that is on the back. I've then created a plug with the 6 cables we need to program this, so you can just plug and play. I've come up with this sort of mess of cables to get it plugged into the Arduino, but my plan is to just have a shield on top that the movement can just plug in for development. Also excuse the little switches I've got here for controlling. I've got the wake, the minute and the hour button all sort of wired separately. What we can do now is program the watch directly. On this one, I'd actually pre-programmed the chip before soldering it on, but now we've got this nice header on, it means that we can just plug that in every time we want to change any software on it. I put a little note on the back of the PCB that says remove battery before programming. That's just because you're going to be putting 5 volts over the 3 volt battery and it may cause some damage. So I'm just going to show you here on a couple of things that we could do. So if we wanted to increase the display time, we change interval. So at the moment we're on 10,000 milliseconds, so 10 seconds. And we could change this quite easily to 5. No, that's 50, that'll be 50 seconds. So I'm going to change to 5,000 milliseconds. Verify that, and then upload using programmer. There you go, that's programming. And that's done. So we're on the start screen again. So hit wake. It's going to show us the time. Having the header on the back of the PCB makes this a really easy device to program. I'm happy with that. There is a slight mistake I've made on this version, but I've fixed that and I've already sent some more PCBs. Third time lucky, and hopefully we're ready to go. There's also the case that needs developing because I designed this for the original PCB, which is a little bit wider. I've shrunk this down as much as I possibly can. I've come up with a new case with 3 buttons on it, so you can set the minute and hours without opening the watch up. All I need to do is reduce the size of the movement bracket, and then I'm going to assemble the watch. So that is all we've got time for today. Yes, I'm going to make you wait for the next video to see the watch in its final assembled form. Hopefully by the time the next video comes out, I will have some PCBs for sale. I think I've decided to sell the blank PCBs so that you can self-source and assemble the movement yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please hit subscribe and like this video. It's really helping the channel grow. I'm loving seeing the channel grow and seeing everybody that's interacting with the project. Put a comment in if there's something that you think I've missed or a feature that you think I could do. The next video, yes, it's hopefully going to be the last one in this series. We're going to build the watch with 3 buttons, have it on display, and start taking some feedback and start pushing these out so other people can build them. So as I say, that's all for now. I'll see you in the next one.